Saturday the 26th, we have, or excuse me, for tomorrow night, actually, we have a presentation by Dr. Gary Ivy from the North Cascades Audubon Society. It's a Zoom meeting, and you can download the link to the meeting on the calendar just by clicking on that square, and it will take you to how to sign up for the Zoom meeting. And he's going to be talking about the sandhill crane populations in our state and what's happening with them. Some places are good, some places aren't so good. So no, it'll be interesting. He gives a good talk. So, and that's being put on by the North Cascades Audubon. Then on Saturday, November 26th, will be a field trip on the winter birds in Nisqually. And we'll be at Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge. And it's from 9 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Maximum 8 participants. Now, it could already be full, but you never know. So all you need to do is click on that square for the 26th, and it will take you to the page to sign up for that. And the cost is $55. Now, I've never done it, but I've been told by people that do it, it's pretty intense. And the person that's leading it will find the birds. So, and everyone knows at this time of year down in the Nisqually is a pretty good time to be down with a bird. Lots of stuff coming in now. And from what I understand, lots of geese from up north, and the swans are showing up, which they are just about everywhere now. I haven't seen them in the Auburn Valley, but that's neat. They could already be here, and they just haven't spotted them yet. Then on December 4th is a bird walk at Clark Lake Park, and this is going to be with Barbara Peterson, our own board member, and she knows that area like the back of her hand, and probably could do it blindfolded. And it's going to be 8 a.m. to 12 p.m.
Sorry, question 9. Is it 9? Start at 9.
Oh, it's 9 to noon. Okay, that's neat.
No, it was enough.
Oh, okay. So it's from 9 to noon. And that's pretty much open to anyone that shows up. We won't have a limit on that because if you go online and click on that square, it will give you a Google map and show you how to get to the parking lot on the north side of Clark Lake, which is where it will start. And that can be any number of people she will drag along with her, and there'll be a lot of birds in it this time of year too.
Where is it? Clark Lake. Where?
Clark Lake is in North Kent, up on the west east hill. I don't know. 240. 240. It's off of 240. It's a fairly good sized lake, and a lot of people don't know it's there. And it's got some nice natural habitat. Okay, and then on December 18th is our annual Christmas bird count. And we're looking for people to volunteer to help out. It's usually nice and cold on that day and rainy, or both. But you will see birds that you don't realize are still here in the wintertime too. And you can go on and click on what's it under? It's under not activities. It's under a heading. It's pretty obvious. I think it's under activities. And you scroll down to see Christmas bird count, click on it, and it will show you all the requirements. And we need to know by December 4th if you're interested in going, because that's when we'll divide up who goes with who. And it covers our whole chapter area, which is broken up into different parcels of different groups to cover it. And more eyes than a couple eyes are better, and ears too for seeing and hearing things. This is used by not only Audubon, but it's used by just about any other group that deals with birds. And it's citizen science at its best. I know we're not supposed to say citizen science anymore, but that's really what it is. There's something else I was going to say about that. I can't remember. Okay, tonight we're honored to have Dennis Paulson, and he's going to talk about Madagascar. And as he will tell you, it's a place like no other place. It's the Indian Ocean's version of Hawaii, where it's been separated from the continent long enough where it's developed its own species that you don't find anywhere else in the world. And having not been there, but seeing a few National Geographic specials on it, and nature has covered it, it's a place that if I had the money, I would go with my camera. So without further ado, I'd like to have Dennis come forward and tell us about Madagascar.
Oh, thank goodness, we got that out of there. Well, we're fortunate enough to hear of a dragonfly nature tour to Madagascar done by a person we knew at the time, who actually runs a nature tour company based just on dragonflies. Trips to see dragonflies. And so we, number one, always wanted to go to Madagascar. Number one is always wanted to go to Madagascar. Number two, are very interested in dragonflies and knew about half the people who were going to be on the tours. We joked with the chant, yes, it was expensive, certainly the most expensive trip we've ever taken, but it was very well worth it. So we went there, let's see, well, we flew, oh, the top of this is either missing or it's going to be lowered at all. There's just some writing at the top that was significant. There probably will be others that will be able to see. Oh no, it's gone. Okay, well, if I can remember, oh, yeah, this is the first. Yeah, we flew. Yeah, there were some mileages on there which were really interesting, but which of course I don't remember. But anyway, we flew from Seattle to Paris, and then Paris to Antananarivo, the capital of Madagascar. It was because we were heading east all the time. We didn't have to spend an entire night worrying about things. So we actually got to Paris sometime during the day and birded. Two couples went, Dennis Smith, my wife and I, and Susan Massa and Jay Whitcott, friends from Portland, Oregon. And so we actually birded from the Paris airport, seeing new birds for France with our binoculars out the windows of the airport, which was pretty fun. And then we flew on to the capital. Uh-oh. Technical difficulty.
Oh, well, let me do it.
No.
Yeah.
It was working just a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
Oh, here it is.
Okay.
Okay, here's, nothing was missing. I just had the wrong slide.
Okay.
So yeah, there you go, 24 hours from Seattle to the capital of Madagascar and 10,365 miles, okay. Finally flying over this channel, landing in the east part of Madagascar. So there's the island. As he said, it's a fascinating place. It's just off the coast of Africa. And in fact, it does have a lot of African species in it, birds and insects, especially things that can, well, almost only things that can fly. But it drifted across the Indian Ocean for a very, very long time, originating nearer to Asia than Africa. So it actually has a lot of sort of remnants of that Asian fauna. It's got a lot, and flora. It's got a lot of remnants of very old groups that died out elsewhere in the world, which is really interesting. I'll say a little more about that. Anyway, so we flew to my pointer's not working well. Technical difficulty always. We flew to Antananarivo here, the capital, and we stayed overnight there. And then we flew the next day to Puliar here, down here. And we spent almost half the trip in the southwestern part of Madagascar. We drove up the coast a ways here, and then we drove inland for quite a way. So we ended up visiting Zongpitse and Isalo National Parks. And this is about as far as this slideshow is going to go. We spent another 8 or 10 days on the eastern part. This is the rainforest part of Madagascar. Like Washington, it's got a wet side and a dry side. The trade winds are coming from the east. So the rain goes up in the very nice mountain ranges along here. The rain goes up these mountain ranges and falls all along this area. There's rainforest here. Sadly, in Madagascar, a huge amount of it has been cleared away already for the people that live there. But there are national parks. So there's no, we'd say any fellow national parks which we visited, which have nice woodlands in them. And then we also visited Ranamofana and Ondasibe National Parks and some areas in between. Interestingly, I've forgotten all the numbers. Madagascar has most of the birds, or many of the birds that are endemic, found nowhere else in the world, as is the case of mammals and reptiles, amphibians, dragonflies, and many, many plants. Oh yeah, so anyway, in the rainforest, there are a lot of really neat birds, but we never saw hardly any of them. They're mostly rare. They're mostly very secretive and shy. We didn't do any playbacks to attract them out of the woods. Since it was a dragonfly tour, although we were doing a lot of birding on the way as well. So we really didn't see that many birds. So basically, I made this slideshow, the southwestern part of Madagascar stops before we get to the rainforest. Okay, so here we are in Antananarivo, which they just call Pana for short. In our hotel, we stayed overnight. Very, very nice accommodations almost everywhere we went. And so we went out in the garden at the hotel, and the first thing we saw were common queens, a bird that's all over Southeast Asia, and it's been introduced to Madagascar as it has to Hawaii and Australia and a whole bunch of other places. But then the next bird we saw was an endemic, Madagascar bulbul, found nowhere else in the world. And the ponies, which are found in Madagascar and some of the other Indian island oceans, male, brilliant red, female, looking very much like a house sparrow, and in fact they are in that family, carrying nesting material. This is sort of after the nesting season. The nesting season is primarily October, November, December. We went there in January because that's the best month for dragonflies. There's a lot of rain, a lot of wetlands available, and it's really good for dragonflies, really good for amphibians and other insects. Slightly after the bird breeding season, though. We found a pond right near the hotel. We wandered through the woods there, and sure enough, it's sort of a water bird, a Madagascar kingfisher, closely related to the African pygmy kingfisher, but a separate species in Madagascar. They found the fish for lunch. And of course, what we were really looking for were dragonflies, so we found this Tetrathemis pollini, which is called the black splash elf. I forgot to put the common name. These things didn't even have common names when we were there. Some of the people on the tour actually wrote a book on Madagascar dragonflies and came out just this last year, and they came up with a whole bunch of common names for all the species, some of which I copied in here, but I forgot this particular one. But there were one of the very special things about Madagascar, incredible diversity of chameleons. There are a few species of chameleons in Africa. There's one or two in India. But there is more in Madagascar than there are in Africa. They come in all shapes and sizes. So this is one of the very common ones where we were in southwestern Madagascar, but also occurred over much of the island. And they're just like you've always read, prehensile, can't use this, they have prehensile tails. They have eyes that swivel in all directions so they can look forward and backwards with the eye, and both eyes swivel independently so they can look up that way and down that way at the same time. Pretty amazing lizards. This one's probably 8 inches long.
Question?
I'm sorry?
8 inches long. We want
8 inches long, And in the garden, they had some radiated tortoises. These are another endemic in Madagascar, very rare and has almost disappeared from most of the island. So there's a pretty substantial conservation effort being made to try to save this tortoise. It's about 10 inches long, very small tortoise. And then another of the many, many, many special groups in Madagascar are the day geckos. There's about a dozen or 15 species in this group, not only in Madagascar, and most of them are bright green. And they're geckos, which those of you who have traveled in the tropics think of geckos as nocturnal lizards that you see on the wall of your hotel at night. But in fact, these day geckos are out in the forest. This happens to be on a fence rail. They're out in the forest and just beautiful additions to the fauna. Some of you who have been to the island of Kauai may have seen one of the Madagascar day geckos there, introduced there. No.
My wife doesn't like them.
Oh, how come?
They scare her.
Oh, okay.
And it was in Maui.
They're very harmless.
Is it not advancing?
You know.
Go ahead. Let me just do it. I'll do it.
Okay, here now is a widespread gecko from Southeast Asia, which now occurs all around the world, the tropics of Pacific gecko. This one was on the wall of the hotel.
Sorry.
This is the view from the back of the hotel. We walked out the back of the hotel and viewed rice fields, and then part of the town of Antananarivo. Just sort of shows you how people in Madagascar live. It's overpopulated. And so much of it is in either rice fields or cattle ranches, and that's why they cleared so much of the rainforest off. But these two boys are walking across the field, rice field here, that had 4 dimorphic egrets behind them. This is an egret that comes in either white or dark blue. These 4 happen to be white. They're the only birds we saw in that particular place. There were birds pretty much everywhere. Then we flew pretty quickly from Tana down to Toliar on the southwest coast. This is just flying between them. You can see here in the valleys, all rice fields. This hillside cultivation of rice that you see so often in Asia. And then up in the hills above them, a lot of cattle ranch, a lot of grasslands, which were originally forest, now grassland, and then some scattered forests as well, trees. And then farther southwest, it gets drier, big muddy rivers we flew over, and all the trees were just in the valleys, often near water courses. And then finally, approaching Toliar, the land became more and more open with sort of small trees as prominent vegetation. And then we landed there on the southwest coast of Madagascar. We had to, you don't drive yourself in Madagascar, you engage the services of a driver. So we actually, well in advance, we had gotten this driver who met us at the airport and picked us up and just drove us around the whole time we were in this part of Madagascar. Very nice fellow. Not too interested in nature. He would just park the car and we would walk off and do our thing, and he would just wait for us, and he'd come back to the car and go somewhere else. So this is Susan and Jay, the couple that we went with, just out examining the countryside, sort of near Toliar. And you don't see that many Europeans or Americans in Madagascar. They're scattered around. Some of them live there, and they're moderate numbers of tourists, but still a very tiny minority of the population. So anywhere we stopped, the local people were kind of interested in just looking at us and what we were doing. Couldn't speak the language. Malagasy is a language I don't know. Some of the people speak French, but not all. And there we found another dragonfly. This is a very common one in southern Europe and all across the continent of Africa, also on Madagascar. It's kind of interesting. One of the examples of range changes in global warming. It used to be found only on the southern border of Europe, and now it's extended north into Germany and France and some of the Eastern European. Just in a matter of maybe 2 decades, it's gone hundreds of miles north, just because the summers are getting warmer, the winters are getting warmer, conditions are getting more favorable for this basically tropical dragonfly. We looked at and photographed insect wherever we saw. There's a really big robber fly, almost 2 inches long, with a big grasshopper. Robber flies are among the most effective predators in the insect world. You can see the proboscis right here. They grab another insect, often in flight, usually in flight, and just pierce it with that proboscis and kill it instantly. Very, very strong venom. I've seen them catch a dragonfly in flight, and they just drop to the ground. The dragonfly dead by the time it hits the ground. And then the proteinaceous material that the fly injects into the insect basically dissolves its innards, and the fly sort of sucks them out. The good thing, they don't get to be 6 feet long. And don't pick one up because they will bite you. But they don't dissolve your innards, they just make you say, ouch, and other 4-letter words. There were birds everywhere. They weren't super abundant, not like going to Costa Rica or Brazil or Kenya or something. But still, we had plenty of good experiences with birds. These little Namakwa doves, they're about the size of a budgie. They're one of the very smallest doves. The males have the black throat, so these are both males. Females lack that. And we saw numbers of those flying around, mostly in this open, dry country. We went over to St. Augustine, which is on the coast south of Toliara. Didn't see that much there, but there were flocks of flamingos. These were way far away. These are greater flamingos, too far to get good photos, but it was kind of interesting to see flamingos there as well. And then we got delivered to our hotel, Auberge de la Table. Auberge is an inn or a hostel or something like that. And indeed, they did have pubs there. There was outdoor eating, which was great because there were birds around and insects flying through the dining room, and especially Madagascar magpie robins. Magpie robins are an Asian group, nothing like them in Africa, but there's a couple of species that are common in Asia, and there's one that's very common in Madagascar. It's one of the really familiar birds that comes into dining rooms and just nests next to houses and things like that. Sort of like house finches here.
Robin size.
Is it
Robin size?
Oh, gotcha. No, it's much smaller than an American robin, maybe towhee size. There's a male. That's a female. That's a male. But they're very familiar, very common. And this is our bed in the place, just to show you the accommodations were really pretty good everywhere we went. It's a very poor country, but they certainly do make things nice for tourists. They used solar power there. This is a solar power fixture that they had. And very nearby, we went into an arboretum of native vegetation. And here's Jay and Susan photographing a African monarch, one of the many butterflies we saw. I say African monarch, and then I say, or is it a plain tiger? Because this species occurs all over Africa, where it's called African monarch, all over Southern Asia, where it's called plain tiger. So if you ever think common names are, if you ever think scientific names are confusing, common names can be more so. This is our guide in the arboretum. You have to, a lot of places we went, we had to hire a guide to go through them. And we just walked through and to see what we could see. There are lots and lots of lizards in Madagascar, lots of reptiles in Madagascar, mostly lizards. If I remember rightly, we saw just over 100 species of birds, which is a pretty small list for a tropical place. A lot of them were really interesting. And we saw about 70 species of reptiles and amphibians. You can't find a ratio like that anywhere else in the world. This Madagascar keeled crocodile is quite common running around the forest floor.
Did your guide speak English?
Yes. And this is an interesting one, just a fairly common lizard there. It's in the iguana family, which is a New World family. But there are true iguanas, as proven by DNA analysis, in Madagascar and in Fiji, and nowhere else in the world except all around the New World. Some of our common lizards in Washington are in this iguana group. And so our corn lizards, for example, and the green iguanas you see in the tropics and so forth. And so this is the really weird things about the biogeography of Madagascar that have these odd things that occur there that shouldn't be there at all. But probably they were much more widely distributed at one time, and they've gone extinct in other parts of the world, and they just maintain their populations on Madagascar just because it's been so isolated, and predators that might have come and eaten them out in some other part of the world aren't there. Competitors that might have eaten them in other parts of the world aren't there, and so they persist in Madagascar and Fiji, interestingly. Here I am looking at one in the tree. A lot of very tame animals there, which is a really nice thing about it. And a bird, a fork-tailed drongo. Drongos are a family all across tropical Asia and Africa. Almost all of them are black. This is a young male. When it became mature, it would be solid black, got a big crest on it. They're sort of like flycatchers. They're aerial insect catchers. And that fork tail, just like a swallowtail kite, allows them to be very accurate in their flight. Madagascar turtle dove, a lot of the birds that have Madagascar as a front part of their common name. This is in the same genus as our Eurasian colored doves that have come into Washington, the large genus in Africa and Asia. And a Sakalava weaver actually constructing its nest as we watched it. This is related, again, this group is related to African species of weavers. And a common jerry, this is a little warbler size thing. It's actually one of the old world warbler families. And a Suimanga sunbird. Sunbirds are very, very abundant and diverse in Africa, and a fair number of species in southern Asia, even into northern Australia. And this is one of 2 endemic Madagascar species. They're nectar feeders like hummingbirds are, but they recover, they sit on the branch and insert their bill into the corolla of the flower. And they're beautiful flowers. So this again was planted in the Arboretum, but it's a Madagascar native, which is this Egypt and the Malvaceae, the hibiscus family, the mallow family. It's about 3 inches across. And then some of the really incredible vegetation of Madagascar, the endemic vegetation. This is Pachypodium, the name, I guess, I should have put it more to the right, sorry. It's an incredibly spiny tree with leaves just at the top. And you can see that this is not a tree that's going to be climbed by anybody that might want to get to the leaves of the fruit. The flowers are up on the top. This is a young one. This is how they look when they're young. Look what they look like when they're adult, when they're fully mature. These are the flowers at the top. This is the trunk. Just amazing plants in Madagascar. Pachypodium. Pachypodium means fat foot, basically.
Does the trunk still have the spines when it gets?
No, it doesn't. It could be climbed. But just when they're young, they may be more vulnerable. That's when they're so spiny. Another of the day geckos is probably the dullest one. Most of them are green, but this is a rather dull one. It was actually on the trunk of the Pachypodium. And here's Alawadia. I don't know if these have common names. Amazing plant. Look at the way these thick leaves on the right. That's a close-up of one of these stems. Again, Didieriaceae is an endemic family in Madagascar. There's just nothing like it anywhere in the world. And these are very common. These are all over the place in the dry southwest. And this is another species of Alawadia, totally different. These are, you wouldn't want to fall on this. These are incredibly stiff, sharp spines. It's like the the arid southwestern deserts of the United States and Mexico, or the deserts in Chile and Peru, or other places, or parts of Africa, where everything is spiny, protecting it from being eaten by herbivores. So all kinds of strange birds in Madagascar. This is a kua. It's a small group of ground cuckoos, actually. We know we have a ground cuckoo in North America, the roadrunner. And these are sort of the ecologically equivalent of that. Cuckoos, you know, cuckoos have 2 toes in front, 2 toes behind. You can very easily tell when you're tracking a roadrunner or a kua. Just one of the many insects we found. This is, I'm interested in all aspects of nature, basically. This is a huge antlion, 3 inches long. I had never even knew antlions got that big. These are the things that make the little pits with the larvae in the bottom, that you see, especially in the east, they call doodlebugs, that the insect will fall into the pit and get eaten by the larva. This is the adult of that. We didn't see too many mushrooms. This was an interesting one. It was right outside our hotel at Port Access, a desert shaggy mane. Now I think I've learned to put those names further in now. It's not a shaggy mane, not even related to shaggy mane. In fact, it's a puffball. It's an odd puffball. If you're interested in mushrooms, interested in that. But it occurs all over the world now. It was native probably to Africa, but it's in southwestern US. It's in Australia. It's in Madagascar, and it's a very dry adapted mushroom, obviously. And there are a fair number of bats in Madagascar. We saw only this one that's hanging in one of the buildings at our hotel. How much do you think noticed that? Looking down at us. And lizards everywhere. This ocelot gecko is about 6 inches long. It's a daytime gecko that runs along the desert floor. And the lemurs. Madagascar is famous for its lemurs. We hadn't seen any until right now. We went out at night with flashlights right around the hotel and saw these absolutely wonderful, tiny mouse lemurs. This is the size of a, well, maybe about the size of a gray squirrel or something, maybe a little bit bigger than that. But just, and they were running around in the treetops there, and they were shining a flashlight on. And they would stop and look at us. Huge, huge eyes. You know, they're primates like us. They're relatives. They have big, almost tree frog-like toes, expanded. You know, primates have nails instead of claws. So the lemurs were a wonderful thing. That's they make it worth going to Madagascar just by themselves. And here we are in Tuliar. We're leaving that hotel, heading north along the coast. And pretty much every village looked like this, just absolutely full of people. Pied crows were everywhere. This is something from Africa. Pied crows are common all over sub-Saharan Africa. They've also made it out to Madagascar even just by flying out there. It's not that far. And this is what the desert looked like north of Toliar. Dry area. All those things you see are that Alawadia. They're small ocotillo looking things. And then a lot of shrubs like that look something like mesquite. And we came across a small sort of saline lake on our drive. It had a few birds, a few shorebirds at it. Black-winged silks. We saw those elsewhere too. And curlew sandpipers. Curlew sandpiper is one of the commonest wintering shorebirds in Africa, and the same in Madagascar. It's all in their dull winter plumage.
Is that related to our curlew?
No, it's a sandpiper more like our dunlin. It's called curlew sandpiper because it's got a down curved bill. But it's definitely related to dunlins and sanderlins and things like that. And then we went to the hotel of Adizia in Baki on the coast, and that was one of the neatest places we stayed as far as I was. I mean, they were all everywhere we went to see. Royal Point Sienna, many of you probably know that from Hawaii or Florida or other tropical localities, just planted there. And this was there were a bunch of cabins, and we stayed in the top floor of this one. And this is what it looked like looking out of the cabin, right out into the Indian Ocean. Africa at a great distance. Lots of introduced plants and lots of arid plants introduced in Madagascar. They have agaves there. These are from America. And they have yuccas. These are from America. And you see them all over the place. You see prickly pear cactus. And all sorts of arid area plants sort of scattered around that have been introduced there. And this is looking up down the shore to the south. And so we spent some time looking through to see if we could find tide pools along there. We found land hermit crabs along the beach. These are hermit crabs that inhabit a snail, but they're not aquatic. They're not marine species like we have here in Washington. They actually live all their lives on land, except they actually go to the water to breed. They lay their eggs in the water. Larvae go out into the ocean like most larval crabs do, and then come back ashore when they're mature and find a shell and shore, just wander around the desert. Go up, they climb trees. And there were some, they didn't find too much in the tide pools, but there was this little square crab in one of them. And the usual magpie robins hanging around the restaurant there. This one had actually just landed on a table and grabbed a bit of butter off the plate. So I guess it knew what it wanted. I didn't know birds like butter, this one did. And there was an infinity pool there, which was really neat. We go swimming and look out over the ocean. And not everybody appreciated when the snake dropped into the pool. But actually we did because we love snakes. It's just like it's a harmless snake about 2 feet long. Maybe it actually swam all the way across the pool, climbed out on the other side. Again, Madagascar has lots and lots of snakes. None of them found anywhere else in the world.
I'll never get my wife there.
Well, none of them were poisonous, at least I can tell you that.
It doesn't matter.
Okay. Gee, should I delete the other snake photos here? Okay. And here again, the view from our cabin, basically these fishing boats. These are sort of special boats that they have there on the Indian Ocean. And there was a lot of fishing economy there. A lot of people have fishing basically for their food. That's what they were going to eat, not commercial. And there were shorebirds along the shore there. common green shank, which is a close relative of our greater yellowlegs. And everybody was catching all sorts of little crustaceans that were in the sand, and a whimbrel, catching a little ghost crab there. A whimbrel, a common worldwide shorebird breeding in the Arctic and wintering at low latitudes. The ones in the old world have a white rump, unlike ours. And this was really special. I was to be able to stand up here, and the swifts were flying around right by our cabin. I was actually able to get some photos of them in flight, which is
How many pictures did you take?
not that easy to do.
I was gonna say, how many photos did you take?
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that. But this is the only one I've ever taken where the feet were actually hanging out, the little tiny that swifts have. So this is a resident there. Well, actually, both of these are residents. The Madagascar black swift is found nowhere else. The alpine swift is found very widely in Africa and even southern Europe. And really, it's a big swift. It's bigger than our about the size of our black swift. And then there were one kind of bee eaters, lots of bee eaters in Africa and Asia. This is actually an African one that migrates over to Madagascar and then back to the mainland. There's all sorts of interesting migrations going on, even in these tropical localities. And migrating past our cabin were these Madagascar giant swallowtails. I was amazed to see great, big, beautiful butterfly flying slowly past. And they're actually migratory within the island of Madagascar. That's bigger than any butterfly we have in Washington. It's like 5 inches from tip to tip there. And the people were fishing there with not only out on the boats, but also from shore, these big seines, bringing in all kinds of stuff, including this. This is a ballyhoo. You probably can't see it. It's a schooling fish that has a long, or maybe a long lower beak. That's actually the beak of this fish. They're called half beaks. Its Spanish name is balao, and then she changed that in English to ballyhoo. And this kid was very happy to see me photographing him. And this is the pathway between our cabin and the offices and the restaurant will just prove fantastic for critters. Every day we walk back and forth. 4 different kinds of lizards along the road. Say lizards are really a prominent part of Madagascar. So you really want to like lizards if you go there. There's 4 different species. The upper left one is a skate. The other 3 are the Cordylinae, the plated lizard family. Many of them striped, just like some of our lizards are striped. And the snake. This is a very small snake. It was probably probably a young one, probably, I don't know, a foot long or 14 inches long, something like that. Still another one we found along the path. So we've got several species of snake, as well as all the lizards just on this path. This was an interesting, a very small snake. Again, it's about 10 inches, 12 inches long. I've never seen a snake bend its neck quite as much as that did. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And then we took a picture of a seashell back in the desert. And it's a murex. It's a very common tropical group. A lot of shell collectors love these. And not until we got back and I was looking at the photos we took on the trip that I discovered that there was a snake in it. That same kind of little snake. There was one living in this like 5-inch long seashell. And there were invertebrates too. I know if you don't like some of these other things, you probably really don't like cockroaches, but this is like a 3-inch long cockroach that was, again, sort of right around the buildings. And that's an egg case. They actually, cockroaches, it's an adult female, a flightless species. This was an egg case coming out. They lay big egg cases full of eggs that develop and then hatch into baby roaches. But they're not in the houses, they're out in the woods. And a big click beetle, again, a lot of really stunning insects there. Again, we love seeing these big insects, we love getting to photograph them. And this is a click beetle, a beetle that if you turn it on its back, it clicks and rights itself. It's like, this is probably an inch and a half long. Beautiful antennae. And again, something that some people like and some people don't like. I don't know what kind of spider this is. It's in a web. It had some prey, but it was pretty big too. Still another snake, a Madagascar Malagasy ground boa. This was like, well, you see how big it was. It was a young one. They get to be about 5 or 6 feet long. And this is the young one right along the path. These were at night. some of these were at night. This one was at night. And again, I've been interested in snakes since I was a little kid. So I was just in heaven in Madagascar. Oh yeah, I meant to say, like I said about the iguanas, boas are a new world group. They are not an old world group. There's a few species in Africa, and there's 2 species in Madagascar, and nowhere else in Asia, nowhere else in the old world. So again, like the iguanas, it's a really odd thing to find on Madagascar. I suppose pythons take their place over most of Africa and Asia. And the other kind of sunbird that lives there, the Madagascar green sunbird, absolutely spectacular iridescence, feeding on, I don't remember what this plant was. It's not a native plant, it's an introduced plant, I can tell. And another one of the spiny euphorbias are found all over the world, many of them grow in deserts, especially in Africa, and they're big and they're spiny. So very much like southwestern deserts, all these spiny plants that you had to sort of watch out for when you were walking around. And beautiful lichens. There were lots of different lichens. I have no idea what kind they were, but we photographed some of them. And another kua, that cuckoo family, the kuas that I told about, another species. And again, this running kua is a good name. They're very much like roadrunners. They ran through the scrub and find insects and small lizards. And then we went to a private reserve not too far from Toliar, where we had a guide and took us around on this trail and showed us, he was trying to show us some of the really neat birds there. And here again is one of these diddy areas, another relative to Alouadia diddy area, these tall, skinny things, just absolutely covered with very small, thick leaves. And that's, I think that's one of them at close range, yeah. And spines, see the spines under the leaves. And then they have baobabs here. Now, Africa is known for baobabs. There are baobabs in Australia, and there are baobabs in Madagascar. And if you see the right photo, if you see me standing, hugging that tree, I'm a tree hugger, I did it. Right next to, these are 2 different trees, obviously, but they're just unbelievable trees. And what they're doing is storing water. Whatever water falls, they can take up into their body of the trunk, basically, and store it there. So people actually in Africa and in Madagascar actually cut open baobab trees and gather the water that runs out and make little splashes in them, and the water, and it doesn't kill the tree. It just actually get water from a tree. So they're just incredible things.
So is that all natural wood?
Yes, it's like balsa wood, very lightweight wood, very porous, not something you make a house out of. But yeah, if you knock on the trunk, it'll hurt your hand. It feels like wood. So here's a fruit, very lightweight fruit, and it does all that. I got this from online. I didn't know all this. Somewhere between a grapefruit or pear and vanilla. The taste is very tasty. I think we tasted them all over it. And if you eat baobab, it's good for all these different things. So it's like a universal medicine. Too bad we don't grow them here. And again, this is a spectacular insect. This grasshopper is about 3 inches long, called a rainbow milkweed locust, because it feeds on milkweed. Some of you probably know that milkweeds are what monarch butterflies feed on, and they're poisonous, and the monarch take the poison into their own body, and so they're protected from predators by that, and they become warningly colored to show off that they're not edible, basically, and that's what this grasshopper is doing. And it's the same, it actually occurs in Africa too, the same genus. There's several species of them in Africa, all equally brightly colored and spectacular. I was thrilled to find this on the floor along the trail, on the ground. And a subdesert mesite, or mesite, I'm never sure how to pronounce, I'll call it a mesite. It's a family of birds with just a couple of species, and their relationships not well known. They're related to pigeons maybe, or also cuckoos, but the DNA shows they're somewhere in between, and they're a family of their own, found only in Madagascar. So not only does it have endemic species of birds, it's got endemic families of birds, a number of them. And so this is a bird about the size of a sharp-shinned fox or something like that, or yeah, hard to relate it to any Washington bird really. But it's we were again thrilled to see it. It was our first mesite and the only one we saw actually on the trip. And it was in this hatchet forest. That's why people went there, just to see these really special, really rare endemic birds. And here was another one. The ground roller family. There's 4 species of ground rollers. 3 of them are in the rainforest in the east. We never could find a single one. We did find this wonderful long-tailed ground roller. It's like a miniature roadrunner. And it actually ran. And the guy, we had 2 guides, and while we stood quietly on the trail, the other guy went out into the scrub and signaled to us that he had found one, and he actually walked it to us. He actually growled it and kept coming closer and closer and walked it right out of the path in front of us. So that's the kind of guy you want to get when you're on a birding trip. And then we found a nightjar, the only nightjar we saw on the trip. Just, that's how you find nightjar, just sitting on the floor of the habitat, and you're very lucky you come across it. And then we found some bangas. The banga family was thought to be found only in Madagascar. There are just a half of maybe 10 species, and they're pretty spectacular, all of them. And with all the work that's been done with genetic work that's been done in recent years with DNA, looking at DNA of most of the birds of the world now, the bird phylogeny is very well known because of all the genetic work. It's found that a whole bunch of species all over Asia and New Guinea and Northern Australia, I think Africa too, were bangas. They were found, and nobody had any idea they were any relationship to these things. But all this family first described from Madagascar, now we know it occurs all over the parts of the tropics of the old world. This is the white-headed banga. It's sort of this is like a jay size, I guess, a pretty good sized jay, actually, Clark's nutcracker or bigger. And again, it's on one of these wonderful Didieraceous plants. And then in the same place, we found sickle-billed banga. Really spectacular. It's sort of like the Galapagos or Hawaii. You've got this island with a group of birds reaching it, and then they diversify. And maybe there's no competitors that feed like a creeper does or something. So one of the species developed this incredible bill to probe into crevices and trees and shrubs. Again, the same size as the other one. And Archibald's Newtonia, this was thought to be a group of its own until it was actually discovered totally through DNA analysis to be a banga. It looks like a little flycatcher. And then here's a falcon, banded kestrel, again found only in Madagascar. It's a forest or woodland species. It just lives in the woods, very much like an accipiter actually. It's got more rounded wings than most falcons, and it's big, it's a Cooper's hawk size. And amazingly, we actually found a nest of it right there. So we saw the adult, and then we located the nest where you see the young birds sitting in it. And then down the coast a little bit, a place called Mongoli. There was a sort of a wetland that we stopped and looked, and I think we found a couple of birds there, but the most interesting one was a Madagascar plover, another bird found only in Madagascar. A bird a little smaller than the killdeer, very long-legged. And we did see Madagascar kestrels fairly widely all around the island, but this was a place we actually got to photograph one flight. Not too different from our kestrel, a little bit bigger. And there are kestrel species all over the world. And then we were out on the coast itself. This is a black mangrove, I think, not too different from the black mangroves that live in Florida here and elsewhere in the world. That's some crested terns perched near it there. These are so-called aerial roots. The actual trees had roots that spread out around them like all trees do. But then to be able to breathe in that sand, they actually stick up these so-called pneumatophores that actually can take in the air when the tide goes out. And you'll see this very commonly in Florida or any tropical coasts. And then there were some of the birds we saw on the coast there. Migrant from the Arctic of Eurasia. Kittless plovers, which are native in Africa and the tropics, And the two species of terns that are related to our royal tern in North America, great crested and lesser crested terns. And they're very widespread across the whole Indian Ocean. You know, water birds tend to be much more widely spread than land birds. You know, not very many endemic water birds in Madagascar, but there are some. There's a grebe, there's that lover I just showed you. I don't know where else. And then one of my favorite fish, the mud skippers, which are very common in Southeast Asia and Northern Australia. They're little fish that have burrows in the mud, and they come out when the tide goes out, they come out and pop across the mud. They breathe air. They have big gills, and they can actually take air directly into their gills. So very, very cool little fish, and you see a lot of them. And ghost crab, again, this is a group found all over the tropics. West Indies and Florida and Baja California, everywhere in the tropics. Many, many species of them. This is one found only in Madagascar. They live in burrows. And there's that same dimorphic egret I showed you near our hotel in Tana. Again, a white morph one. We did see some dark morph ones as well. This one's carrying a pipefish. If any of you know about pipefish, they're related to seahorses. We actually have a pipefish in Washington, little marine fish that are tube-like like that. And then a striated heron was there too, a relative of our green heron, which is very widespread in the world. And then his father and his son came out and walked right across the mud to where we were photographing birds, and couldn't speak our language, but he showed us, he was able to show us that he wanted us to take photos of them. So we did. And here we are back in Tulear. This is what it's like driving through some of these villages. And oh, I see it's also Tulear now. I love watching this thing come down here, see how it spells its words. Here's our sunset. We finally left that hotel. And here we're heading east from the west coast now, heading into the center of the island, fairly far south still. One road across the island. Here it was. It was finally got into some really nice woodland, much moister here than where we had been. And this was on Midse National Park. And just birding from the road, we saw a Madagascar cuckoo gobbler, the only species in its family, endemic to Madagascar. Great big bird, again, the size of a Cooper's hawk or something like that. Catching insects, big insects, and lizards. So many lizards there, you might expect that there be a fair number of birds adapted to catching them, and there are. And parrots, not too many parrots. There are two species of Vasa parrots, just plain brown things that are fruit eating like all the other parrots, and pretty distinctive looking in flight. Brown parrots, who would have thought it? And here we are walking through the woods here again with a guide. And he took us to a white-browed owl, the only owl we saw in Madagascar, except for a barn owl that we saw at the Madagascar airport that night. But this was neat to find. And giant millipedes. This millipede's like 6 inches long on the side of the tree. It's a tropical group. I've seen the same thing in Florida and everywhere in the tropics. But this is the biggest one I've ever seen. And another one on a tree, a totally different sort of millipede with a really short body. Yeah, they look like pill bugs, but they're millipedes. And they just, again, so many really neat insects, especially anywhere in the tropics you find them. But we found some special things there. This is a family of grasshoppers that occurs all around the tropics, but they just come in all colors of the rainbow. Really distinctive looking. I wish I knew the species. And another lemur. We found this little sportive lemur in the woods there. We actually were walking by the tree and looked up, and here it was sitting up there looking down at us. It's about the size of a rabbit, say, in body size. Big eyes they all have. A lot of them are nocturnal. And paradise flycatchers, this is again a group that's in Africa and Asia, Madagascar. One is endemic to the island. Like quite a few of them, it's polymorphic. It comes in either white or chestnut. So we don't have too many polymorphic birds. Think of snow geese and blue geese. but this flycatcher is that way, and I don't know why. I've never read anything explaining what the advantage of that two-colored morph is. And another day gecko. This is the largest day gecko. It's about 8 inches long, and again, match the trunk of some of the trees, not so much this particular one. And the long-billed tetrarcha in the woods there. This is actually a fairly rare species. It's found only in this part of Madagascar, so we were happy to see that. It's another endemic family, the tetrarcha family is found only in Madagascar. It's sort of like a, you know, like vireos or something like that, but bigger, the size of a robin, maybe a little smaller than a robin. And I'm real interested in beetles, and tiger beetles are one of my favorites. And this, I'd never seen an arboreal tiger beetle. These usually the beetles you see running in sandy areas, back and forth on the sand, catching other insects. And these actually sit up in trees and watch for their prey. And one beautiful orchid named Bricum, again, is a genus all around the tropics. I saw these in mangrove swamps in Costa Rica. I was very surprised to see them in Madagascar. Really beautiful. Epiphytic orchids on the trees. And here's another, I actually went over to photograph this assassin bug on the right, this really brilliantly colored assassin bug. And as I was approaching it, I realized there was a very tiny little gecko there, the gecko about 2 inches long. And then couldn't not photograph some of the other, these are both nymphs of assassin. They're not mature, they're immature. But the forms and the colors of some of these insects are just almost unbelievable. They're very predatory insects. They have long beaks, like a robber fly, and they eat other insects. They do the same thing as the robber fly. They pierce the integument of the insect and soften the insides and suck it out. So good thing all these things don't get very big. And a paper wasp nest that we saw in the woods there, very much like the paper wasps that we have in the southern U.S. And a baobab flower that had fallen down off one of the big baobab trees that our guide held up to show to us. You see the size of it. Some of them are pollinated by bees. I'm not sure about the bats. I didn't mean to say that bats, pollinated by bats. And here's the only accipiter we saw, a species of accipiter, probably again Cooper's hawk size or a little smaller. Found again only in Madagascar. And maybe my favorite lemur, the Veros, and that word S-I-F-A-K-A is pronounced shafak, and that's the call that they make, sounds like shafak. That's where that came from. But they're just amazing creatures. They're fairly common. We saw them in a number of places. Just beautiful. Very curious. They actually come toward us to see what we were doing. And a little bit farther inland, we came into this grassy area with these Bismarck palms and this Jurassic sandstone, these wonderful hills in the Asalo area. And we stayed at a hotel there in among these trees. The Hotel Asalo Ranch with cattle grazing around the edge. These are beautiful African cattle. They're very different looking than most of what we see. This kind of big humps on them like Brahmas, but all different colors. And there's our little cabin in the hotel. And there's night blooming cereus. This is an American species that's planted in Madagascar. These flowers are like 5 inches across. And of course, there were dragonflies. This is you might guess this is a female because it's the name of it, crimson dropping. The males are brilliant red, very common all across Madagascar. We didn't see a lot of dragonflies in this part of the trip because it was so dry. We weren't near water almost anywhere. So this little oasis was kind of neat because it had several kinds of dragonflies. We saw a lot more dragonflies once we got into the wet part of eastern Madagascar. This is again another species found only, and there's a river cruiser group. Is a group that's all over the world. Big dragonflies that fly up and down rivers. We have one in Washington even, but there was a male on the right and a female on the left just hanging up together, waiting for the photographer. And then more Ustellets, chameleons, the 3 different ones that we saw there, including a monster one that I couldn't not catch. And it just could have bitten the pea willies out of me if I let it. It's big, strong mouth and lots of teeth.
They have long tongues too, though.
Very long tongues. They're the ones that shoot their tongues out with adhesive tips that catch insects and bring them back to the mouth. And other species in the same genus, much smaller, a little tiny one on a flower here. You can see the tails curled around, its prehensile tail. And another spider, arachnophobes look the other way, but a beautiful big green winged spider. And a common butterfly. This is an African butterfly. It's all over Africa, called citrus swallowtail, because it actually, the larvae live in citrus trees, oranges and grapefruits, as well as native members of the same family. And then this little Cesalpinia, which is native to Mexico, they have that planted at the hotel here. This African butterfly is feeding on the Mexican flower, no problem. And these wonderful rock formations that we wandered among them. There were lots of lizards in there and some birds. Hollow National Park now. There's a trail that we went out quite a ways in this, in the very dry hillside, but very lush trail because it went along the stream ran along this valley. For lovebirds. Lovebirds are an African group, and there's this one species on Madagascar. Tiny little parrots. And an olive beekeeter that was sunning on the path. We just stopped to watch it for a while. It just landed on the trail basically, and it spread its wings out, looked up at the sun, and probably maybe some of the insects, parasites that it had on it will get overheated and actually leave it. That's why they do that. Our birds, we have birds doing that in our yard, robins and towhees. And we have termites along the path. I don't know if you can see these termites, but they're a tropical group. The head and the body and the neck is almost transparent. Some of these little ones, so they have tubes on the snout. They're really hard to see from this distance. But they actually, when something like ants attack their colony, these soldiers, which are the ones with these tube heads, they actually shoot something out of the tubes, sticky thing that will make the ants' legs stick together. And that's how they protect their nest colonies. And they're common in the American tropics as well. And another one of those gaudy grasshoppers. Very, very thick antennae, they have very distinctive. And a typical ground tiger beetle, like the ones we have in Washington, with great big jaws that they catch other insects with. And hibiscus, there's several species of hibiscus we saw there. And African violets. Some of you may have them in your house growing or see them in other places. This is where they're native. And there's a clearing along this trail, really the only clearing, otherwise it was pretty densely wooded, that we stopped at and ate lunch and saw some neat animals. Madagascar button quail. Button quails are relative to shorebirds, and they're interesting in that they're reverse sexual dimorphism. The one in the upper left is a female, and the one on the right is a male. The left one is probably an immature, but the females are the bright ones, and they actually court the males. Female, of course, lays the eggs. They haven't changed their sexual that much, but then the male incubates them and takes care of the young, like phalaropes, very much like phalaropes. And more lemurs, this brown lemurs that were there, an adult and a young one. Took a bunch of photos of them. Those feet are just amazing on lemurs. But there's just such adept climbers. They climb and they jump from tree to tree. Not so different from a monkey, basically. But of course, there's no monkeys on Madagascar, so the lemurs have radiated into all the different niches that monkeys would inhabit on the mainland. There was a ground lemur in Madagascar that's long extinct. It was a huge lumbering thing that walked along the ground, like a gorilla, I suppose, maybe. And most people's favorite ringtail lemurs, which you've seen in television programs left and right. A whole troop of them was moving through this clearing and watching us and sitting there. This one was was probably anointing its tail. They have glands on the inside of their wrists that they actually produce a smelly substance, and they run their tail through that. And then when two of them challenge one another, they shake their tails at each other, take off this nasty smell, I guess. Pretty amazing what animals, but they're much more foxy looking than the other lemurs. And there's one eating fruit, or fruit eaters, and fruits and insects both. They rob bird nests like monkeys do. And another boa, another fellow that was on the canyon picked up this boa and brought it over and showed it to us. This is a tree boa. This is much bigger than the ground boa that we found before. But they're, again, this boa is found in Madagascar and nowhere else in the whole world except period, nowhere else in the whole world. And this was a stream that ran along there that kept it moist and probably had a lot more diversity of animals in there than it would have otherwise, including dragonflies, a very common damselfly, a mating pair, and then a common dragonfly. And another common dragon. This is one of the, this is a, again, these are endemic to Madagascar. This is a one that's in Africa. This genus is in Africa where they're called widows. There's two species in Africa, and then the one in Madagascar, they have black marks on the wing. The one in Madagascar has a silvery patch in the wing, which is why it was named silver widow. And that's a female on the upper left. They're very tiny. They're an inch and a quarter long, maybe. And we saw quite a few frogs in the wet part, not so many in this western part, but this one was on the stream, very common all over Madagascar. And this was one of the thrills, was this Barrow's shipwalk, the same lemur I showed you before, that was on the trail where Netta and I were walking. We were by ourselves at this point, and it was very curious, and it just hung there. Well, I think it came there between us, actually. Netta was on one side photographing it, and I was on the other side photographing it, and that's how close it was. And then knowing what I did about this group of lemurs, we left it behind. We walked up the trail, and we just stopped. We said, well, I wonder if it will come up after us on the trail. And these lemurs have a unique way of locomotion. They climb up in the trees just fine. When they're on the ground, they do this. They're called dancing lemurs. They get up on their hind legs and they jump along their legs to move over the ground. And nothing else in the world does this. Yes. Next place was the Relais de Lorraine, the stopping place of the Queen, a beautiful hotel in this rocky Jurassic sandstone country. Beautiful place to stay with all kinds of planted bougainvillea there and a lot of non-native plants planted in the garden. You can walk right out of there, right up into these rocky hillsides. And here we are eating one of our meals there. This is our whole dragonfly group. And you know, this was not a hardship trip. This was like ice cream with mango slices. And beautiful, again, beautiful lizards just everywhere. This skate we caught there. I didn't even have a book on the reptiles and amphibians in Madagascar when we went there. So we just caught everything and photographed everything. And then after we got back, I actually got the book and was able to identify all these things. And one of the many butterflies, this dark blue pansy is a very common butterfly all over the sub-Saharan Africa. A whole bunch of things in Madagascar that you have come over from Africa, as well as all these things that occur nowhere else. Which is some of the rock scenery there. And broad-billed roller, great big species of rollers. Rollers are in Africa, Asia. They're related to kingfishers and bee-eaters. And this is a widespread species in Africa, which also occurs in Madagascar. Again, an aerial flycatcher, catches big insects like butterflies, dragonflies in the air. And then this lake that was actually on the property of the Relais de Lorraine, we spent a little time looking on that. Found the red-billed teal, again, a common African species, which is out there. And several kinds of reed frogs we found during the trip. This one was right at this lake, just beautiful little sort of relatives of our tree frogs in the same family as our Pacific tree frog here. And then this one of the many dragonflies we were looking at. This is kind of neat because this species of dragonfly is a fairly large dragonfly, called a long skimmer. But the exuvia that you see, this cast skin above it, is the exuvia of that very species. Probably not the one that dragonflies come out of the water and split their skin and emerge as an adult. And so probably not the one that this one came out of, but I would title this photo "Visiting My Childhood" or something like that. And then we got in our bus and waiting for these ankle paddle coming down the road, made our way to eastern Madagascar, and that's the end of this. This was a tour, the dragonfly tour. And we were just these two couples, Netta and I and our two friends, were on all of this. And then we went to the Relay de Lorraine. That's where we met the people, where I showed you all the people at the table. That's where we actually met the rest of the tour and went with them for the rest of our trip to eastern Madagascar. Any questions?
So how many days were you there?
I think 19 days. Yeah, anywhere you go that's really exotic is worth spending as much time as you can afford, time and money, that's for sure, because there's just so much to see. If we went to these same spots 2 hours later or the next day, we probably would have seen some different lemur or a different lizard or something like that, a bird. And if all you're interested in is birds, it's a less good place to add to your list than many other parts of the tropics. But the birds that are there are very special. And if you like nature in general, it's a wonderful place. Question?
Dennis, how many species here are a lot of them endangered or?
Oh yes, lots and lots of endangered, sadly. Let's say there's so much clearing of it. I mean, it was the whole eastern part of it was all rainforest up into the mountains. And I don't know that 10% of that is what's left. But it's at least some of the parts that's left are in national forest and protected, but they're islands, things can disappear from islands. So it's one of the big environmental concerns of the world.
The hill in the middle picture looks like it's lava.
Actually, I don't think it is. I think it's just brown earth or something. These are rice fields out here and planted trees, eucalyptus. And I think this is just some sort of brown. I don't think it's lava. I don't believe there's any volcanic stuff in that area. But basic rock formations, as you see some parts of Africa.
So is this Eastern Africa?
It's about in the middle now. We're heading to the East Coast. It's probably about in the middle. And so we went past that big rock escarpment and turned left and went headed north into the rainforest. Anything else?
Any questions online? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
None seen. A couple of comments saying great presentation. No questions there.
Okay, well, this has been fun for me. I've never given a talk where I've seen my words go on. Chuckling at some of the spellings of some. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Did Madagascar separate from Africa or from Asia?
From Asia.
To get there?
Drifted across the Indian Ocean for a very long time ago. I don't remember how long, but yeah.